Good day, and welcome to our webcast, How to Solve Data Issues in Enterprise Asset Management, brought to you by CFE Media and Technology and sponsored by Apteam. Today we'll be joined by Cheyenne Jacoby, Business Intelligence Manager, Advanced Technology Services, and Sam Rusum, Director, Smart Manufacturing Practice, Grantec. I'm Kevin Parker, an editor with CFE Media and Technology. Today's presentation can provide continuing education credits. CFE Media has met the standards and requirements of the Registered Continuing Education Program. Credit earned on completion of this program will be reported to RECEP at recep.net. A certificate of completion will be available for each participant to download upon successful completion of the test at the end of the presentations. As such, it does not include content that may be deemed or construed to be an approval or endorsement by RECEP. To take the Learning Unit exam, use the Learning Unit exam tab option at the top of your screen. The exam will open in a separate browser window. You can complete the exam after the webcast. However, the link will break when the webcast signs off. You see before you an initial description of today's presentations. Here are some tips to help you get the most from today's webcast. If you're experiencing issues with your slides or audio, refresh the browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's picture. You can control the volume of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or on the webcast platform. For technical problems with the audio or slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of the screen to access system checks to try before contacting an online technician. If a technician is needed, type a message in the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. The Ask a Question box is also used to ask questions of our speakers. The live Q&A session will begin after the presentations conclude. To access a PDF copy of the presentation, use the Event Resources tab on the left-hand side of your screen. This will also be available with the on-demand version of this webcast. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session. We'll send you an email message within a week with a direct link to the webcast archive. The event is a live educational webcast presented on September 10th, 2020, and under the educational category, Technical, Health, and Safety. The exam will be posted on CFE Media websites with the on-demand version of this webcast. The exam is for one RECEP ASEC Certified Professional Development Hour. I'd now like to share with you a word from our sponsor. In a world of generic enterprise software, Apteam provides hyper-niche software solutions that drive results. Apteam helps EAM users to minimize equipment downtime, maximize equipment reliability, and optimize their work order completion metrics. One of Apteam's customers, Kobarberg Brewery, found their availability increased from 50% to 94% in 6 years. Maintenance costs per liter reduced 20% in 5 years, and Apteam helped them change from 2 yearly maintenance stops to 1 stop per year. Another customer, Maurice Piers, a seaside amusement park, enabled a 90% paperless environment across the entire organization. They gained the ability to track over 80,000 pieces of inventory and recorded an uptime of more than 99%. That's why more than 4,100 highly specialized organizations in more than 20 industries and 54 countries rely on Apteam to streamline their everyday operations. Get in touch to find out more. Email info@apteam.com or visit Apteam's website at www.apteam.com. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce today's first speaker, Cheyenne Jacoby. Jacoby is a Business Intelligence Manager for Advanced Technology Services, otherwise known as ATS. Since joining the company 17 years ago, he has served in several operational leadership roles, specializing in information technology and business intelligence. Jacoby graduated from Purdue University with a bachelor's degree in industrial technology and went on to receive an MBA from Bradley University. Thanks for joining us today, Cheyenne. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, my name is Cheyenne Jacoby, Business Intelligence Manager at Advanced Technology Services. I'll be targeting the subject of leveraging big data today. ATS is an outsourced maintenance provider that performs maintenance activities on production and support equipment at customer locations. As part of our duties, we actually collect information in a variety of CMMSs, or computerized maintenance management systems. At ATS, we maintain a CMMS called eFactory Pro, and we utilize Power BI to transform and analyze the data collected from a variety of sources. Our agenda today will be reviewing a few of the general and big data challenges of creating meaningful data analytics. Then we'll review the process our BI team utilizes to manage new requests from requirements to publishing. And finally, we will look at a real-life example related to equipment production schedules. We'll get started with some general challenges and move into big data challenges. Our first general challenge is related to multiple definitions or meanings of the same concept, acronyms, or calculations. This occurs when different executives, departments, or even personnel within the department disagree on what the data means. This can also include the lack of information or disagreement on the system of record for the data. The next challenge is closely related to the first. Although you have a source for the data, there are disagreements on the outcomes. There's also limited to no transparency to the system or process, which creates trust issues with the source, calculations, and any insights that come from the data. The next challenge is related to multiple ways to perform the process and potentially multiple systems collecting the data. This redundant processes throughout the organization produces different results because the process have been altered over time or had different perceptions at the start. They become different processes with the expectation of producing the same results. As anyone that's experienced this knows, it causes high error rates and conflicting data whenever you analyze. Our last general data challenge relates to processes that are out of control, which create no data, bad data, or inconsistent groupings of data that's perceived to be similar. This creates insights and predictions that are unreliable, where the decision makers lose credibility with the organization. This also creates a platform of mistrust in the data from multiple sources, and it just snowballs even if the system of record is not involved in the original process. It becomes that snowball effect of multiple mistrust in data. So how can we mitigate some of these risks we have identified? We can create a unified dictionary of terms and calculations that the entire organization can utilize and reference. We even insert unique terms and calculations into help and information pages within reports. We can identify the system of record for a process and create traceability to source systems. The transparency is created with the source system through keys. We utilize work order IDs from the CMMS system in visuals and exports to allow this transparency to be created. Creating visuals or support pages that allow the validation of outcomes by those performing quality assurance and consumers of the reports are also helpful. And then last but not least, we identify what is important to our organization and stakeholders through expectations related to objectives, targets, outcomes, and communication plans. As anyone that's researched big data, there's many sources and opinions on big data challenges. We'll review 4 today. The first is volume, which relates to the storage and useful life cycle of the data. Data captured from machines, networks, and social media platforms grow per second. So it's always important to determine at what point the data is no longer relevant for your analysis. The second is velocity, which relates to the speed at which the data becomes available. Common strategies for fast-growing data are data sampling and aggregated segments. An example of this could be a stream of the last 15 minutes of a monitoring device, such as vibration analysis, and aggregations of data on both hourly and daily segments for analysis, trending, and alerting. The third is veracity, which concentrates on the quality of the data being collected. Abnormalities, noise, and biases can all affect the quality of data. Creating and implementing a data integrity strategy will help keep the data clean and concentrate on keeping issues from accumulating in the source system. And our fourth is variety, which concentrates on both structured and unstructured data sources, because not all sources will be a spreadsheet or database. Unstructured data comes from videos, images, audio, monitoring devices, PDFs, and emails. Our common goals with big data are how to transform the data and what decisions can be enhanced from the insights. So whether you're transforming the data by cleaning, enriching, analyzing, or retaining, or gaining insights through slicing, searching, integrating, or visualizing, remember to work with different visuals, including clustering, sunburst, and tree maps to help create insights from big data. Next, we'll look at how to organize inputs with a process. The first step is define. First, we work with requesters, business partners, and subject matter experts to define the objectives to establish a vision for the process, targets to achieve, and boundaries for the request. Next, we define success and what it looks like for the request by identifying process integrations, expected outcomes, available key resources, and their timeline. Second is collect data. During collection, we are pulling in the available data and making decisions on storage if the data is not available in our data warehouse. We are also investigating the key fields between systems when integrating multiple sources. Third is cleaning. During cleaning, we are transforming the data. The goals are to standardize and normalize the data by removing duplicates and redundant data, verifying the data is up to date, and repairing, rebuilding, or removing missing data. Fourth is analyze data. During analysis, we are creating visuals, evaluating data by slicing and dicing characteristics and timelines to help create more impactful reports and dashboards. And fifth is interpreting results. Interpreting targets conclusions from the analysis. It's a good practice to determine if the conclusions pass your logical test based on what you know about the process and systems. You can even use a demonstration to get additional feedback from subject matter experts about the conclusions. Continue to analyze outliers and abnormalities to increase comfort with the conclusions. And finally, the backbone to the process is really optimize and iterate. Optimize the solution each time you touch it, asking, are all connections and fields still needed, and are the visuals helping tell a story? Finally, iterate development by creating the most value in the shortest timeline, and then continue to add value after the initial publication, asking, what can we publish in 1 week, 2 week, or 4 week increments, pending your iteration timing? Now let's look at an example of big data from our eFactory Pro CMMS in combination with the process. First is define. In define, we identified the objective of the request was to determine the total time available on equipment within a CMMS. This would provide and input into multiple calculations, including machine availability and mean time between failure. We then looked at success. Success was defined as being able to view the total equipment schedule hours by day or month based on customer or organizational reporting structure. Second, we collected data. During collection, we found that each equipment has a production schedule maintained in the CMMS. The current schedules are commonly 8 hours, 16, or 24 hours per day. These schedules are recorded into a table for about 100,000 equipment, creating an annual growth of 36.5 million rows in the table, or 183 million rows over a 5-year evaluation period, which definitely gets you into big data. During our clean phase, we found that not all equipment schedules are accurate in the CMMS during the day they begin. Thus, the process allows updating the equipment schedules retroactively to update the total equipment hours over a time frame. If that process fails, then missing data is an issue, and data integrity is key to long-term success. Data was also transformed in the analysis service with a calculation for total schedule hours that could be aggregated by common date ranges and equipment. Fourth, in our analysis, we found that the connection is made, or during analysis, the connection was made from Power BI to the analysis service. Visuals were built to analyze the hours with tree maps, bar and column charts for trending and clustering, pie and cards for review of total hours for the evaluation period. Then additional measures were created in the analysis service using schedule hours. Here's one of our schedule hour reports with an increasing trend over 12 months and a breakout by organizational reporting structure across the top. As you can see, the majority of our production hours are contained in one reporting structure. The bottom shows the top 10 equipment groups by that support further analysis and decision-making by HR, operations, and sales. So whether it might be recruiting demands or training for operations, or even what is our most common machine types that we currently have out in the field today, this information helps with further decision and analysis. We can also see, based on the evaluation and your timeline that you extend or subtract, you can also see your balance of total hours. Here we have 398 million hours over that 12-month evaluation period. And you can also see in the pie chart the split between the 2 years on where your balance of production hours are currently coming. Please feel free to contact us if you're interested in learning more about ATS. Kevin, back to you.
Well, thanks, Cheyenne. I'm sure we'll have questions for you during the Q&A. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker, Sam Russum. Russum is the Director of the Smart Manufacturing Practice at Grantec Systems Integration. He has been working in smart manufacturing for 11 years and focuses on the strategic and practical application of Industry 4.0 technologies for manufacturers. Sam is passionate about engaging executive stakeholders and end users to make the link between smart manufacturing technologies and real business value, particularly in the areas of MES, IIoT, advanced analytics, data integrity, and digital twins and simulation. Welcome, Sam, to today's webinar, and please go ahead.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Kevin. As Kevin mentioned, my name is Sam Russum. I'm the Director of Smart Manufacturing at Grantec Systems Integration, where it's my job to guide our clients, our company, and our partners to well thought out, valuable, and achievable Industry 4.0 solutions. I'm also here representing Mesa International, an organization that Grantec and I have been working very closely with for over a decade, and I hold their MESMOM Certificate of Competency credential. I've been in the business of smart manufacturing for over 11 years now, and today I'll be talking with you about the importance of data integrity in a world where big data drives our behavior every day, a world I would say that we're living in today and will continue to live in for the foreseeable future. I'll also briefly give a background on Grantec and Mesa International. So Grantec Systems Integrations is a system integrator and solution provider that has been around since 1980, and we are proudly celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. We have offices throughout the US, Canada, and India, and we specialize in solutions for the life sciences, food and beverage, and CPG industries. Check out our website for more information about Grantec. As I had also mentioned, I'm here representing Mesa International as well. Mesa is the Manufacturing Enterprise Solutions Association, a worldwide, not-for-profit community of solution providers and end users. I highly recommend you check out Mesa's website at mesa.org to see their resource library, and stay tuned as we are actively developing some exciting new content we'll be releasing soon. And with those introductions out of the way, let's talk more about the role of data in Industry 4.0 and what best practices we can apply to enterprise asset management. One of the important tenets of Industry 4.0 is a shift from metrics-based approach to data and information to more of an analytics-based approach. I'm borrowing some of these images from Mesa's Manufacturing Analytics Guidebook, where they describe both the old metrics and the new analytics perspective of doing things. With metrics, you have a fairly straightforward path of capturing and using data to react to a specific problem. There are usually manual processes to collect and analyze data for a one-time fix. And since you have to go out and get the data you need to make that decision on your own, you have a limited data set constrained to that problem you're trying to solve. Industry 4.0 and big data changes that model quite a bit in the analytics approach. You see a new combined step in this model, where we are taking our modern tools to add context to a huge amount of data collected from various systems throughout the enterprise. Instead of our react step in the metrics approach, you see a proactive decision step. But most importantly, you see the closed loop, where one's actions are fed back into a continuous improvement process and used as a new data point for the next decision to be made. Now, when we're talking about enterprise asset data in Industry 3.0, the era of PLC and SCADA control systems, to Industry 4.0, the world of closed-loop data and information-driven decision-making, we see some important distinctions. In Industry 3.0, data is not always real-time and may require operators to manually transfer data from one system to another, like typing data from a paper record directly into your ERP system or an Excel spreadsheet. Since data is slower and more cumbersome to collect and use, its applications tend to be more straightforward and less smart. Industry 3.0 also tends to scope solutions at the plant level, since inter-plant or plant-to-enterprise connections may not exist. That all changes significantly in the modern Industry 4.0 setting. Big data and data lakes provide platforms to receive various data streams from plants, EAM systems, supply chain, and more. And once this data is in a common reservoir, you can start to combine that data to add context and make your information more useful. There's also more of an expectation that solutions scale across the entire enterprise, and that a solution developed for one plant can be copied over to another for a higher return. But there's a risk to all of this too. As data becomes more plentiful, more impactful, and more automated, it becomes more important that it be truthful. Bad data can lead to compliance and safety issues, incorrect decisions on the plant floor, poor data quality, and distrust of future Industry 4.0 solutions as well. Essentially, we're talking about the old mantra, garbage in, garbage out. If you can't trust the data that goes into your decision making, how can you trust the decisions that you make? To address this risk, I like to turn to the life sciences industry as a leading example of the importance of governance and data integrity. When it comes to pharmaceuticals and other life sciences manufacturing, it becomes a matter of patient safety to ensure that you can demonstrate you made your product the right way every time, and you need the data to back that up. Data integrity is defined as maintaining the completeness, consistency, and accuracy of data throughout its life cycle. And that life cycle is defined as covering the creation of that data, processing it into valuable information that can be used and reported on. And once it is used to inform a decision, there are rules about how you store that data for its lifespan. And finally, when you no longer need that data, you need to have a plan for how to get rid of it. So if you need to have good data throughout the life cycle, it's important to define what good data means. And for that, we turn to the Alcoa Plus mantra. The original Alcoa acronym described good data as being attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate. And that was later modified and added to under the Plus moniker to add that it should be complete, consistent, enduring, and available. Now, there's a lot of material online about Alcoa Plus, and I've only got 15, 20 minutes to speak here, so I'm not going to do a deep dive into each tenet of that model here. But what I would like for you all to take away from this is that these are the areas where best-in-class life sciences companies evaluate their gaps in data integrity, and it could be a great framework to apply to the various industry verticals to do the same. The final takeaway that I want to talk about regarding what we can learn from life sciences and their approach to data integrity is that your direction needs to come from the top. It is actually very clearly stated in FDA guidance that while everyone is responsible for data integrity, senior leadership is ultimately responsible. This encourages an enterprise-wide approach with powerful sponsorship, and this is particularly important with the rise of big data. There are a lot of endpoints that could be consuming data that an individual contributes to a data lake, and you might not even realize it. Other groups in your organization could be accessing your data and assuming that it's accurate, and that's a significant shift that makes data integrity even more important. So to summarize some of our takeaways from the discussion so far in data integrity and Alcoa Plus, remember that as data is used to make more decisions, good data becomes more important. Data integrity applies to the entire data lifecycle from creation to destruction, that you can apply the principles of Alcoa Plus to your specific business and use cases, and to consider the enterprise perspective and get sponsorship from senior leadership. Now that we've all hopefully learned something about data integrity and why it's important, let's talk about some more specific principles that are practical and applicable to asset management. We're going to talk about considering the entire stack from the shop floor to the global enterprise. We'll also talk about going beyond technology and considering behavioral and procedural controls to maintain accurate data. And we'll talk about finding new stakeholders in your organization to reduce rework and increase the overall value proposition of your data management initiative. So one thing that's important to consider, apologies, I seem to be missing a slide. So I will briefly talk about the scope of data integrity across the entire technology stack. So if you are looking at the MESA model or ISA 95, you see the divisions from level 0, your physical equipment, through level 1, your PLC and controls layer, level 2, your SCADA layer, 3, the MESMOM layer, and 4, your ERP systems. It's important to consider that as data moves through this stack and as you continue to consolidate information from sensors up through PLCs and controls, all the way through historians and eventually outside of the four walls of the plant, that each of those transfer points is a potential risk point for data integrity. And if you are looking for particular areas to focus on, those types of transfers are definitely one that you should look out for. Another important thing to consider when trying to solve for data management issues is that while technology is an important tool in your tool belt, it's not the only one. Again, borrowing from life sciences, they focus a lot on the human and process factors that can also affect the truth of your data. Behavioral controls focus on the human contributions to data. And one of the key things that we talk about here is about establishing a culture that supports data integrity. Your people need to understand why having accurate data is important to the entire business, and they need to feel comfortable reporting potential data integrity issues to their management. Once again, we see the concept of having senior leadership taking a strong role in needing to establish a culture of data integrity. It's also important to consider both intentional and unintentional errors that could affect your data. Intentional errors can usually be attributed back to culture, but unintentional errors are often controlled for using our next topic, procedural controls. Procedural controls provide a structure to manage data collection processes and should focus on making it easy to do the right thing. Always look at manual data collection points, as that's a common risk to data integrity. And I also like to point out a common trouble spot that comes up in data integrity audits, which is not having a clear process for correcting erroneous data. Writing down the wrong value in a quality test could be a simple mistake, but it could also be data fraud, and you need to make sure that you identify those potential points. You cannot simply delete bad data and replace it. You need to have a fully auditable trail of any corrected data. And then finally, we do get back to some of the technical controls that can be put in place to manage data integrity, which mostly comes down to validation and making sure that data stays good, as I mentioned earlier, as it transfers between different systems. And my last tip for the day is to think about new stakeholders and allies for your data projects. Industry 4.0 encourages a different and wider group of stakeholders than Industry 3.0 projects did. This is another tangent to that big data discussion we had earlier about how you can have more stakeholders using or wanting to use your data and you might not even know it. So if you're planning an asset management data initiative, ask how other stakeholders in your organization can take advantage of your data. I'm thinking of the C-suite, the product development and research and development teams, supply chain, and procurement, just to name a few. By engaging these groups early, you can avoid duplication of work and issues having multiple sources of the truth. And if they can take advantage of your data, finding new sources of value that will contribute to your ROI, it'll make the whole initiative more appealing. One great example of a missed opportunity to collaborate with stakeholders to find new value I hear about a lot is around engaging product teams in manufacturing data initiatives. The equipment you have, what you're prepared to produce, and how well you actually produce it could be extremely valuable information to new product development teams. And making this data readily available could significantly speed up new product introduction speeds and align with your company's strategic initiatives. Another collaboration use case I hear from customers that's more directly tied to asset management is coordination with procurement teams. You could be engaging with your procurement team and coordinating what data they could leverage to prepare things like a spare parts inventory and negotiate with suppliers. They can also more effectively coordinate with manufacturing floor teams to discuss the impacts of alternative suppliers that might fit some of their strategic initiatives. The point is, if you can find more users, more allies, and more value by opening up the stakeholder conversation beyond just the four walls of the plant. So in conclusion and summary, I hope this is all useful information for the group today. I hope that you're coming out of this session with an understanding that data can be used to inform more manufacturing decisions and that accuracy of the data is more important than ever. I want you to know that you're not alone in needing to solve data integrity issues, and there's a lot of material and best practices that can help you guide that process. And finally, know some suggestions for managing enterprise and asset data accurately, considering the entire stack, looking beyond just technology to solve data integrity problems, and engaging a wider set of stakeholders. That's all for now. I'll pass it back to Kevin and be back in just a minute or two for the Q&A.
Well, thanks so much for that, Sam. You certainly will be back with us again before the close of the program. Now is the time for our audience to send questions to the presenters. Type your questions in the Ask a Question box. We will get to as many as time allows. Questions that we do not get to today will be posted online with the archived version of the webcast. Remember to download a certificate of completion and other resources. Use the event resources on the left-hand side of your screen. Cheyenne, let's turn to you with the first question. When we're talking about the integration of other data into an enterprise asset management system, are we more often talking about data from real-time control systems or from other enterprise transactional systems or something other?
We're usually looking at other enterprise transactional systems. So We look at HR data that integrates in. We look at organizational structures that come into play as well. We also have, we're currently on more of a best of breed system than an ERP right now. So our accounting systems could be a source of data as well, along with our HR systems, our CMMS. So.
Good.
Some real-time controls that could be put into place as well. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
No, go ahead.
Some real-time controls that could be put into place is things from IIoT. So your monitoring devices could come into play with your equipment information as well. You have some keys that could play in there as you're doing some real-time monitoring and bringing in that information. It's really identifying the strategy and your data sources.
And anecdotally, are you able to point out one area or one kind of data that is most in demand for those who are using the enterprise asset management system?
I would say calculating some of the common like SMRP outputs. So things like mean time between failure, downtime, availability, things from that perspective. So really the data comes down to your machine availability, OEE can come into play there as well. So just that's mostly the most demanding data as really the things that get captured day in, day out. Some of the less demanding would be more your transactional information, maybe the work order information that's being captured, but your downtime, things from that perspective that gets captured daily or even hourly, those are the things that cause a little more demand.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks so much. Sam, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, actually, I think that that got answered pretty thoroughly.
Good. One thing that was interesting to me as we went through the briefing, Cheyenne, was talking about data cleansing or the normalization of data, and that's becoming such a huge issue. But when we talk about cleansing data, what actually are we talking about? It is a matter of the fidelity of the data. Is it a matter of taking out the outliers and focusing on the core process data? Where would you start in a discussion about cleansing data?
Well, it comes down to the objectives of what you're trying to accomplish. So sometimes looking for those outliers is your objective. Sometimes you're looking for those outliers to say that you're looking for where are we falling out of the process control? Where are those things that are coming into play that we need to investigate further? And it kind of creates similar to a statistical process control diagram, if you will, where you're investigating those outliers more and more. The other thing that you could have is an objective where you're looking for predictability. So how do we know where we should be performing at? And so the only way to get that predictability is remove some of those outliers, your tops and bottoms, or things that fall out of what you would consider control. Sometimes you have to define that control as you're clustering data and looking for it. One example that I have in real life is that we were looking at a set of data, and the initial perception is we can make a prediction from this whenever the process was actually found to be more of 2 to 3 trends and not just a single trend. And so that surprised everyone that was evaluating the data, but the output of that was creating more characteristics and drilling in to find out what created those 3 trends. It wasn't just a single cluster of data.
Great. It's interesting that you mentioned statistical process control, because in retrospect, it seems more and more today that SPC, or statistical process control, was really a progenitor of a lot of the trends that we see today with the application of statistical methods, going on to machine learning and AI, and all of that being done because of the increasing power of the computers around us. Whereas with SPC, they didn't have quite as much computing power on the desktop at that point, so it was a little bit more of a transitional technology. But It just strikes me more and more nowadays as I say that statistical process control was really a harbinger of things to come. The next topic I wanted to ask you about, Cheyenne, was you talked about scheduling and said that schedules are done on a daily basis, but the whole topic of planning and scheduling, again, is a very interesting one because we had a lot of advances in planning and scheduling in the 1990s and the first decade of the 21st century. And a lot of those could be classified as being machine learning or artificial intelligence, but just at the time, those terms weren't very current. When you look at advances or the way planning and scheduling is being used today, Cheyenne, what strikes you as most interesting or as most productive?
I think from the perspective that I can put into this, it's more from a maintenance than it is a production schedule, but really from more of a maintenance perspective, looking at scheduling not only resources but equipment as well, is getting coordination between maintenance and operations, and then not only coordinating that but also scheduling the backlog. So looking at not just trying to react to maintenance, but also planning out your resources. So, and not just planning them out to 60%, but planning them out to 100%, if not even a little bit over 100%, knowing that some of your schedule is going to slip with reactive work, but mainly filling up your schedules with proactive work, whether that might be preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance, things from that perspective, and any other work that can be planned out from parts being ordered or production schedules not allowing a machine to be worked on until, let's say, 11 p.m., and you have a window of 2 hours. All those things can be scheduled up and coordinated, and that's really one of our key things that we employ as well. It's called work execution management, is just making sure that you account for all the labor that you have as resources available.
Great, Cheyenne.
I know that probably doesn't really answer like advances in it, but that's kind of the perspective that we have. So thank you.
No question, Cheyenne. I appreciate you taking a shot at it. Moreover, a very good response from you there. Thanks so much. A question for Sam from one of our listeners, and they're asking, how do you see technologies such as machine learning or blockchain helping in verifying accurate and reliable data? And are there platforms that use such technologies in that respect?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to respond to that. So machine learning and blockchain are certainly two technologies that have a lot of buzz around them right now. You'll see a lot of material and marketing of material available where people are really trying to grow in this space, and they see a lot of benefits in manufacturing along AI, ML, and blockchain. I think that as it comes around to data integrity, I think that machine learning is more of a customer of data integrity, and blockchain is more of a potential provider of it. And I say that because while, when you think about machine learning and its applications, my brain certainly does start to rattle around about how you could use machine learning to help identify and correct for invalid data. But maybe before we even get to that, it's important to think about, these machine learning algorithms are absolutely another endpoint that relies on good data going in there. So when you have more human analytics, data scientists, or even just control techs using analysis of data, you do have that human elements that can look at those outliers, look at the things that don't make sense, and kind of account for that and manage it proactively. You can't always trust a machine learning algorithm to do that. They're going to accept whatever data goes into them as the single source of the truth. So I do think that as a consumer of validated data, going towards a machine learning paradigm for any type of your analytics and improvements is definitely going to rely on making sure the data that goes in there is good. Now, on the other hand, let's flip over to blockchain, right, where I see blockchain as being more of a method for establishing data integrity, right? The entire idea of it is that you do have your complete transactional ledger so that some of the problems I talked about earlier, like, for example, someone just erasing bad data, is really not something that is even allowed by the platform, and you know that that audit trail is coming along with it. I see it used more frequently in supply chains to manage transactions between suppliers and vendors and manufacturers and end customers. Though there is, it's certainly starting to creep onto the manufacturing floor as well. I see that as more of an emerging technology. I personally haven't seen a lot of applications of it, but I'm interested and I read about them, and I think it's an exciting space to keep an eye on. I know that you also asked a little bit about particular products or technologies around it. I don't have any direct examples of that I think that I'm ready to throw out there just yet, but again, it's a new space that I think we're all watching with interest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. I mean, I don't think there's any question that the use of machine learning as a kind of advanced computerized statistics is going to be, with us, all of us, in a very short amount of time, if it's not with us already. When it comes to blockchain, I think if you look at something like the oil and gas industry, where you have custody transfer of resources on such a frequent basis, and it's so central to the functioning of that industry that the spread of blockchain will be right behind that that we're seeing in the financial industries now. And in fact, that's really one of the main paths for these new high technologies into the industrial space, is that first they pass through financial tech, and then they get involved in the oil and gas industry, where because of just the huge amounts of capital involved, there's plenty of investment in the kinds of human resources that are needed to make these things happen. And then once it's kind of run its way through those premier industries, it kind of trickles down into the more day-to-day manufacturing industries, if you will. Here's a question or a topic that I'd like to hear from both of you on, and that is, no matter what I read today, and they're talking about data, they're saying, well, this data is no good because it's stranded here as just a data point and there's no context. And that makes me wonder sometimes, what does it mean for data to be in context? Sam, I would ask you first, but what does it mean to have data in context from your point of view?
Sure. So the main idea of it is that context is what turns data into information, right? It is the surrounding data around your data that makes it useful and makes it valuable. So actually, I'll kind of go back to some of the life sciences topics where they actually, as they're talking about data integrity, do specifically call out that it applies to both the raw data itself and the metadata around it that applies context to it. Your basic temperature probe out there on the shop floor, right, that might be monitoring the temperature of a storage location, it's just outputting a number, right? It's usually outputting that number as a voltage. So just putting out the surrounding metadata around that of the engineering units, where it's located, what it's intended to be measuring, what its high and low limits are, what it means if you exceed those limits, right? All of that is additional data that you are pairing with that very raw point to make a number have meaning. So when we're talking about context, that's really what we're getting about, is what turns it from a bunch of ones and zeros out there on a hard drive into something that you can interpret and use and derive value from.
Well, that's interesting. I know that in another era or another area, metadata, data about data, is much easier for law enforcement to secure than it is for them to get the actual data that was transferred in the phone call. And it's just amazing the amount of information they can glean simply from the metadata without having to tap into the actual data that's under question itself. So it's an interesting phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can even elaborate on that a little bit. I mean, that's another great example, right, that just might bring it to something more tangible outside of manufacturing, right? If you think of your data as the ones and zeros that represent your voice and the other person on the call's voice going back and forth, sure, that might be restricted, but there's a lot of other information that kind of comes around that happens, right? Where did the call originate from? Where did it go to? Who called who? How long did it last? Where were they when that call happened? All of that is metadata around something like a phone call, and you can see where that becomes pretty important if you are talking about a perspective like law enforcement.
Good. Cheyenne, we're getting down to near the end of our webinar for today, and I wanted to ask you a final question. And my question is, when it comes to the topic of data use in enterprise asset management systems, what do you think the most promising or interesting area of pursuit is when it comes to what people are going to be able to get from their EAM systems in the future compared to what they're able to do with them today?
I would just say putting in from the context of what the future holds is really going to be based on the manufacturers or the segments that you're in that's using the EAM. So if you're looking at that stack of technology that's coming through, I think cloud-based has been there for a minute, and being able to source and put things together without having to have on-prem data and not having to increase your IT spending based on having all those resources setting basically in a room that's cooled 24 hours a day and having that data available, backed up. You can even do backups to that data and have it readily available in case of emergency. So I think that's really where it comes down to, is having that data available out in the cloud, being able to interact with it from other services that are there, not needing to make those connections or gateways to on-prem.
Well,
I know that's not really new, but moving towards that direction of having that on-demand service where you don't have to buy a whole EAM. You can buy licensing to the EAM, and that's another practice that's been going on for a little while, but you don't have to own perpetual license. If your personnel that needs access to it fluctuates between 10 people to 100 people, you can change your subscription and reduce your overall overhead to that subscription as well.
Right. Well, there's no question you're 100% right when it comes to the fact that cloud is really the biggest thing that's happened for enterprise asset management systems as well as ERP systems in the last couple of years. And it has really, in a lot of ways, revitalized those markets and made the demand for them to grow as replacements or as people have grown into that. So thanks so much for that. Sam, Cheyenne just mentioned the technology stack, and that was something that you mentioned in your presentation. When you look at the technology stack that's involved in enterprise asset management or manufacturing execution systems for that matter, which layer, from your point of view, proves the most problematic or is the site of greatest dynamism at the moment?
Yeah, I might say, so I know it's level 3. I know that my answer is that MESMOM level 3 layer where I see the biggest gaps. I don't know if that's because that's the world that I live in every day, or I don't know if I live in that world because that's where the gaps are, but that's certainly the one that I see the most. You know, I would say that for a lot of level 0 and 1, you know, more control systems, more hardware, things like that, the advent of IoT is hitting those stronger to have more smart devices that provide data or to have other gateways that support that. I think that SCADA systems are really some versatile and valuable traffic cops and data managers in the stack, and they get a lot of attention too. Level 4 ERP and enterprise level systems, there's usually a lot of money at that layer of the organization, so that certainly gets a lot of attention. It's really that level 3 MES-MOM layer, that most intelligence layer that's in the plant floor, and sometimes your most expensive system in the plant floor too, as far as a software system goes, that can be difficult for companies to take the plunge into and to do it properly and realize the value out of it. So certainly I would say that MES-MOM layer responsible for working in conjunction with your real-time SCADA systems, your historian systems on the floor, but also needing to work transactionally with your ERP layers and systems that are outside of the plant. That is usually where I see people kind of struggle the most and still turn back around to an Excel spreadsheet to transfer data back and forth, where really there's more opportunities to be had there, and that is a necessary step for a lot of the other really interesting and compelling aspects of Industry 4.0.
Yeah, well, that's a great way of looking at it, because that really is, as you say, where the real-time and the transactional come together is on that initial plant floor system. Thanks for that. I want to thank both of our speakers for their participation today. I want to thank our audience for their great questions. And I'd also like to special thanks to Aptian for sponsoring today's event. Now that we're just about done, we'd like to know how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as the webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it, because we use this information to improve our webinars. Finally, on behalf of CFE Media and Technology and today's sponsors, thanks for attending, and we'll see you next time.